Ladies and gentlemen, now hosting the RizzoCast, put your hands together for Steven Risotto!
Alrighty, what is happening, everybody? And welcome. My name is Steven Risotto. I cover the San Francisco Giants for SFA and the host of RizzoCast, a podcast that features current and former big league players, coaches, fans, media, and others who are regarded as some of the brightest minds around the game of baseball. And today's a very special episode because for the first time in the podcast history, I am not recording from my residence in Pacifica, California, and instead I recorded this live inside the newsroom podcast room at San Francisco State University. So shout out the team over there at the Golden Gate Express, which I'm now a part of. I'm a reporter for the student-run newspaper at San Francisco State University. And I was in a bit of a time crunch, and they let me record inside the studio, so that's pretty awesome. Hopefully, you'll see and hear some of the cool impact. I still had my stuff, but it was cool to be in there. And today's guest is Jessica Kleinschmidt, a baseball reporter and media personality who has accumulated over 60,000 followers on Twitter. She's very well known in the baseball world, and after stints writing for FanDuel, MLB.com, NBC Sports Bay Area, Jess is now a multimedia producer for the Oakland A's, where she's a staple in their radio broadcast team and in conducting player interviews as well. And earlier this month, she started a brand new gig with awfulannouncing.com and thecomeback.com, where she'll be writing features and other articles along with recording on-air segments. By the way, we recorded this the day after National Women and Girls in Sports Day, which comes up in our conversation. She's an advocate for women in sports, women in baseball, and we have a really good conversation. We talk about her media career, making it in a male-dominated business, her baseball origin story, the upcoming Oakland A's season, and so much more. It's all coming up next on RizzoCast. This is episode number 130. And without a further ado, let's get started. All right, we are back with Jessica Kleinschmidt on RizzoCast. And Jess, I know you mentioned that you do a lot of these, and I really want to make this one unique because you do so many of these, and I feel like it gets repetitive after a while. You get asked the same questions,
Yes.
but I'm hoping to change the narrative this time. So I'm excited to have you on.
I will say I haven't done one of these in a little bit because I had a lot of stuff that was waiting in the, I told you I wanted to wait till contracts were signed. But you're my first one since signing my 2 new contracts. So boom. And my new camera. We're killing it.
Yes.
Yeah.
New camera and first one after the new gig. And let's talk about that new gig. Awful Announcing. So that is that's kind of a site that's been around for a while. I read it because I find myself very consumed with news on sports media.
Yes.
You're probably familiar with Steve Berman, the Bay Area sports guy. I used to read all of his columns and stuff. He does a great job. But what kind of went into landing with the Awful Announcing crew?
Well, I'm right there with you. I loved Awful Announcing. They wrote an article on me once before, not necessarily for good stuff. It was a weird situation I had with this crazy blogger, neither here nor there. But I saw they had an opening and I reached out to the owner because, like I said, I've talked to him before with being in an article, giving him some quotes. And I said, hey, I could use a side gig on top of my A stuff. I miss writing. I don't know what else that means, but I applied for the job. And they said, well, we'd love to have you on, but we would like to utilize you a little bit more. And the owner, Ben Koo, who's a fabulous human being, literally one of the nicest people in the world, said, he sat me down and asked me what I ultimately want for my goals and my career. And I like to pride myself on being the Mike Trout of baseball sports media. I want to do all 5 tools. I want to do writing. I want to do the podcast, the radio, television, every social media and digital, all the things. And I'm lucky enough where my past caught up with me and I'm able to do all of that. So then they said, well, we'd love to have you writing, but like, let's get you a show again. And if you're like me and you've been involved in social or the media for a long time, you have a graveyard in your background full of former podcasts you've been a part of. I have like 3 or 4 that are buried in the backyard, but I've missed it a lot. So he's like, let's give you a show as far as like podcasting goes, so I can revamp that aspect of my career. And then a little fun project that's more of a surprise for people as well. So, between the writing, podcasting, the show, I'm kind of back to being the Jess that I've always wanted to be. And it's a lot of work, but I thrive on chaos and being overwhelmed. And it's nothing I've never done before. During my time with NBC, I was doing all of that as well. So I get to do that. And I just re-upped my contract with the A's. So I'll be doing that as well. So I'll be able to, my favorite part is, of course, being at the ballpark. So I get to utilize my new gig on top of the stuff that I'm doing with the A's. So it's just gonna be a really fun season.
Yeah, and you mentioned something really cool there. You mentioned that you're excited to get writing again. And I feel like, a lot of journalists, they go from, they're writing for a newspaper or a website, and then they go to TV, and then they don't return ever. Like Stephen A. Smith is the one that comes to mind, a columnist for a while, writing for.
I forgot he was a columnist. Yeah.
Everybody does, because he's just so good at what he does now. But a lot of people just don't go back to it. But you were hungry to write again.
Yeah. And, I thought I could just like blog on the side. Nobody was stopping me from blogging. It's just a little bit better when it's in a reputable site. Not saying I'm not reputable, but my, medium.com blog can only go so far. But it also showed, because I wrote a blog when Trevor May was signed to the A's. And, people, Mets fans in particular, are going to read that. And I wanted to honestly just look and see who was reading my stuff. And you have the good analytics. And when I was searching for a writing gig, I could refer to that. And that's always good, because it doesn't matter what retweets and stuff are. You want to dig into the analytics, who's clicking on the article, who are those, organic reads, the new reads and all of that. ComScore comes to mind. And so that's why I was doing it. But it's also like, I love the written word. I think it's a communication style that's never going to die. And I can write an article and then do a quick hit about it, and vice versa. If I want to do a podcast, I can write 2 to 3 articles about that. And I've just always had a knack for writing, and I love poetry and I love quotes. And I feel like, it's a little bit different now that people are working from home. You don't have to worry about bosses hearing a video. You love the fact that you could write, because people that were working can still read your stuff, but they can do both now. And I think that's important, but it's something that I've loved since I was a little girl. I sucked at math, but I could write a damn good story, a damn good article. So I'm happy to reintroduce that into my career.
Nobody in journalism likes math. It's the worst. I'm glad I got it out of the way quick.
It's true. And so when I meet somebody who's good at math, I'm like, congratulations. And I don't know if you went through this, because when I was in high school, like algebra, like how dare you introduce numbers and letters together? But when stats came about, I was like, I love this. And then luckily that became a huge part of my job as well, because stats, I love. I could do that all damn day. Graphs I loved, but you introduce algebra and calculus, like I'm leaving. No, thank you.
Yeah, no, my motto was like, if a cop pulled me over on the side of the road and said, to get out of the speeding ticket, you need to find X. Like that would never happen.
Arrest me.
None of it's realistic. There's nothing in algebra that's like, I guess maybe like the mental, like problem solving, like knowing that you're solving problems, but like stats, like, that would work. Like if there's a class on financial literacy, like bring it on. I think we all need that.
Absolutely.
But algebra's stupid. So we just have to get that out of the way. And by the way, rest in peace, the Jessica Kleinschmidt Substack. December, like maybe 3 articles, right?
I think it was 2.
It had a good run.
It did have a good run. I think I could have turned it into a Substack if I wanted to, but that's a lot of work. Now I have amazing people to help me like make my articles look good. So that's
exactly. Do you know like what kind of stories you're going to be writing? Because I know like media reporting's a lot different. It's not really like the game stories, or like maybe there's some player features here and there, but like you're going to be focusing a lot on your colleagues. So is that going to be a little different for you?
No, they can suck it up. But I also, for the awful announcing stuff, I have to be very careful. Like I'm not going to throw Melanie Newman under the bus or anything like that. I do that to her face. But and I'm also doing the Comeback. The Comeback is like their sister website as well. So just fun stuff. I don't know how long you've been following my career, but I used to work at Cut 4, and that was back when they had bloggers. I was writing the fun, unique stories, and that's something I've always kind of had a niche for, because niche, whatever. It's kind of like GIF and GIF, whatever you want to call it. But I wanted to be different because you mentioned game stories are fine. I feel like when you look at a press box, a lot of the beat writers are writing the important stuff, don't get me wrong, but that's 80% of the media. I want to kind of do all the other fun stuff. I have an article coming out, but I won't leak it, but I've talked about it before, but I'm doing it again. But the first article I wrote for the Comeback was the fact that Eric Burns sacked Tom Brady 3 times in high school. Those are the kinds of things that I like. We all know Tom Brady's retiring. We know Giselle put out a statement about it. We know he took his talents to a beach and announced it. I want to be like, something different, like, oh, speaking of Tom Brady, let's not forget that this happened. I love evergreen stuff. They even said they like my features more, so I like that. I just want people to know my subjects and who I'm interviewing. And at the end of the day, when you cover baseball, it's a very long season. You get the same, you're talking to the pitcher every 5th day, and he understands that he needs to say certain things, whether his outing goes good or bad. But I want to talk to him the day after that. I want to see, like, did you go home and study film like crazy? Did you mess up so badly where you couldn't even see yourself and study film? Like, I want to talk about that stuff, because at the end of the day, you do talk to them so much. You really want to know more about them, and you want people to pay attention. And even if you have a friend, because I wrote an article about Mark Canna a couple years back, and he signed a potato once. And I saw a photo of him doing that, and I thought, why isn't anybody asking Mark Canna about this? So my editor immediately was like, go ask Mark Canna about the potato. And I did. And it was so weird and quirky, and I can get away with that stuff. I'm not saying people don't take me seriously, but they're going to be like, I bet you Jess Kleinschmidt wrote the potato article. And Mark Canna gave me a beautiful quote, some derivative of, you'll never forget your first potato that you signed, and just stuff like that. And that's the stuff that I love. It's the stuff that people who may not love sports will pay attention to. And we want people to be interested in what you're writing about. And that's my personal goal. If you don't like baseball, if you don't like what I'm writing about, that's fine. But I would like to know, like, if you're curious about the pop culture side, or like a really cool conversation I had, or about Max Homa and how he wants to bring more entertaining factors into golf as we consume the content. I think that for me is really important, because let's be honest, my boyfriend's into golf, and people that I've dated in the past are into golf. Like, you want to know what the fuss is all about and stuff like that. So for me, it's a good challenge, and I like being able to write about multiple sports on top of it all. And the beauty of that is too, if I can't tell you things about golf, I can still have a good conversation with a player or somebody working behind the scenes and still write about it.
Because at the end of the day, before they're athletes, they're also human beings.
Yeah.
And that actually leads me into my next thing. I read something that you were quoted on in a story, and you said, quote, I remembered being such a nerd when it came to baseball. Beyond the stats, beyond the weird stuff that people are obsessed with, spin rates and everything like that, I want to think about these guys as the heartbeat underneath their uniform. So based on that, do we do like a disservice to where, we just talked about stats, we talk about spin rate, launch angle, all this stuff in baseball. Is it starting to get lost, kind of the aspect where, like, these people have families and they come from different backgrounds, and the fans, like, they could memorize a guy's stat line, but they don't know, like, what happened to him in the minor leagues and how he struggled and how he's back better than ever, all these like inside baseball stories. Like, is it a disservice with a lot of analytics coming into the game that's kind of being written about more than the stories, in between the ears or whatnot?
I feel like you have to stay true to the statistics, because people need proof. They need a number attached to certain things, and that's with every aspect of life. But yes, I think that that's very important, because, like I said, I think about Tony Kemp, and there's times I'll be talking to him and I was like, oh shoot, I should ask you a baseball question. And he himself told me, I want people to know me as a good man, and then a good husband, and then a good father, and then a baseball player. And I feel like I love bringing that aspect out to people. And specifically with Tony, my best friend was in town coming to a New York Yankees game because she married a Yankees fan. And so I got her tickets, I got her on the field. And I was just excited to introduce her to Tony Kemp. She couldn't tell you what position he played. She couldn't tell you if he was batting first or second that day. She just wanted to meet Tony Kemp that I bragged about. And she did. And then the best part was she didn't even get like fangirled because she was like, oh, it's Tony, the guy you talk about all the time. I feel like everybody should fangirl over Tony Kemp because he's a wonderful human being and a damn good ball player. But it's the same thing too. Like for him, like you think about the veteran status, think the Stephen Votes of the world, the Brandon Belts of the world, they're always going to find a job because I don't want to be the person to say you're a good clubhouse guy, but you also have to remember those guys continue to get jobs because those are so imperative to a really good, solid team. They'll eventually maybe, go into a coaching role. And I mentioned Vote, something like that, because we look at Mark Kotze, a very young team, and he had the Jed Lowry, he had Elvis Andrus, he had Stephen Vogt at the beginning of the season, and he leaned on those older guys as far as being a manager because this was his first year and he's not that far removed from being a player. You think about Gabe Kapler, same thing. He must have leaned in maybe on the Brandons a little bit more to ask what they can do. And you don't think about that stuff because you're so obsessed with whatever. And don't get me wrong, like I said, stats are very important. But if I'm sitting next to somebody who just Googled a number about that person, I don't really care. That's easy for me to find. I just want you to fall in love with the game itself, the entertaining factors, or, you see Jesus Aguilar, he changed his stance a little bit. And if that works, I can say I talked to him about it and it's helping him because of this X, Y, and Z. You can refer to those numbers, but that's not everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of digging into your career a little bit, I mean, you were doing like some customer service and some HR before getting into baseball. So when you decided like, okay, we're this full send like baseball time, like was that terrifying for you to just like, I don't know how it worked, and maybe you could tell me if you like dropped everything and then started baseball, like because that sounds horrible. That it doesn't sound horrible, it sounds terrifying.
It was
I can't
terrifying.
imagine like ditching like maybe a comfortable job ish and then like going into like your dream or like trying to get to your dream. Like it seems like there's a lot there to lose.
And you're a college student, so I don't want to like scare you, but I dropped out of college because I was just sick of it. I was like, I'm not going to learn anything here. But I was working for the federal government, the Bureau of Land Management. And I just remember sitting there and I loved my job, but I felt like I was peaking. And like I said, it's a government job. So I was set for life, great benefits. My pay was good. They were helping me with my school. And I remember coming in that day and I was like, I need to like quit. I can't do this anymore. I think I'm just going to like quit, move to the Bay Area and work in sports media. Mind you, if my future children ever did that, I would freak out because my mother was not okay with it. My mother got me the job. It was supposed to be a summer internship, but I stayed there. And I mentioned, paying for school. So I came in, I took my morning break, sat with my boss and said, this is my 2 weeks, I'm quitting. And she's like, why don't you just take a couple hours, like go eat on your lunch break and come back? So I went on my lunch break and I just remember being so stressed. And I thought, why am I stressed because I'm making this decision, or am I stressed that I'm not going to go through with it? And I remember telling myself, I'm going to be stressed because I can't live this life anymore. Like I live in Reno, my family's here, but like I'm destined to be an A's reporter. Mind you, back in the day, I told my father I was going to do that as we left a baseball game. We can revisit that later. But I just knew I was like, I wouldn't be okay with my life if I just settled. And that's every aspect of my life. So I quit. And then 2 weeks later, I moved to the Bay Area and I had to do a lot of odd jobs to get through it. And I was blogging on the side. It was the most terrifying and smartest decision and best decision I've ever made.
Your mom interpreted it as an awful announcement. No, I can't. That was horrible.
No, don't do that.
That was horrible. I just ruined it.
I also appreciated that. Yes. And she was devastated, but later on, like she understood because, I wasn't just leaving my job, I was leaving my family back there. And that was tough for her. I just remember her being so devastated. And obviously she's happy for me now and really, really proud of me. And I also know what my journey was it was selfish, but in a good way. And I also didn't have like a husband or kids to worry about. So if I was making like $20,000 a year, I could blame myself. You know what I mean? So I didn't have to worry about like all of that extra stuff. And I was like, if I'm not going to do it now, I'm never going to do it. And I'm so glad that I did.
And she could say like, "Oh, my daughter's on TV." Like, tell her all of her
Yes,
friends.
I will say though, the first time I was on TV, she called me and she goes, "Can I cuss on this?"
Yes, go for it.
She goes, "Who the
I
fuck?"
welcome it.
She goes, "Who the fuck was that?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "Well, I saw you on TV, but it didn't sound like you." I was being too reportery. And it wasn't like I was talking about AJ Puck's injury, right? I was talking about like a fun-ish story. And my mom was like, "You sounded good, but it felt like I was watching like a news channel." And I was like, "I get where you're coming from." So I needed to hear that from her. But I know we're to be like, AJ Puck is, having some setbacks with an elbow injury as opposed to like Dalton Jeffries got to live out his moment starting at Oracle Park and his family was in the crowd. Like there's two different ways you can do it, but that was a funny thing too. She's like, "Yeah, great. You looked great, but you sounded weird." So I'm glad she told me that because then I was like, why am I trying to be somebody that I'm not? So that helped too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know baseball is kind of like a family thing for you. I know your dad was a little league president, and he
You did
touched
your homework.
I
Oh my
did. Yeah.
goodness. Yes,
I
love
will
it.
not go into one of these without like, doing my due diligence.
I
But
love that.
dad was a little league president. He touched a lot of people in the community that you grew up. Um, and you played baseball with the boys.
I
So like
did.
that was like your thing. So and now like you're looking and you're seeing a lot more girls say like enough with the softball. We're sticking
Yeah.
with baseball.
Yes.
What do you think when you see girls like on like the 16U national teams or getting scholarships to play baseball in college? Like, is that just like a like yes moment after all those years of playing with the boys?
I'm jealous first and foremost because I didn't have those opportunities. But once I let that go aside, hell to the yeah. I think it's amazing because it was one thing like I had to quit playing baseball because when I went to high school and tried to try out for the team, the head coach of the team said, "Well, you have softball." And it wasn't like basketball or football where it was the same across both genders. It just or multiple genders, but I didn't think that made sense because not only did I have to learn how to hit again. I had to go back to a smaller field, went from Babe Ruth back to a standard little league size softball field. And then I had to make all new best friends. So I had best friends playing baseball since I was 7 or 8. You get into high school, we were already trying to fit in. I was just like a tomboy. I didn't like being girly. And I'm like meeting all these new people, and you have to develop chemistry so you're good on that team. So it was like a very traumatic experience for me. And the cool part I'm glad I did it because I had like phenomenal defensive skills that I don't think I would have been as good if I started with softball. I also didn't even know it existed, but now that that's passed, I'm on the board for baseball for all, making sure that girls can continue to play baseball if they want to. I don't think I don't think it'll be a situation where I think times are changing. Maybe we will have our first female MLB player, but I do think that we're for sure going to end up having a professional girls league in the near future. I don't know if it's going to be MLB equivalent, but we have people managing teams, like legitly managing. I think of Veronica Alvarez, who's in our organization, who's phenomenal and just an amazing woman to have around. And Rachel Baklavec, of course, she comes to mind. We have managers that are doing it, and it's just like, and I talked to Brandon Crawford about this when Alyssa Nakin got hired, and he was just like, "Yeah, so," and not in a mean way. He was like, "Women, yeah, like I think if she is deserving of the job, she deserves to be here. It's not a big deal." And not taking it away from the fact that she was a woman. He's like, "So she deserves to be here." And I loved hearing that. And it's stuff like that. And it's more welcoming. It's not as awkward or weird to see women just walking around. And not too long ago, I wasn't allowed in the clubhouse. You know what I mean? So it's from that perspective. And the mentality for a girl who's played baseball is so different from one that didn't. And I mean that beyond just being around the guys in the clubhouse. Like I work in an industry that's very male dominated, and I often forget that it's not the norm, that I shouldn't be there, but I also like don't give a shit. You know what I mean? Like I deserve to be there. You deserve to be there. My paycheck says I deserve to be there. And, we deal with a lot of pushback, but like, I think that's how a lot of people deal with everything in life. So I definitely know that those women deserve to be there. And that's cool to hear, because it's no longer going to be like a PR stunt, like, oh, okay. And it sucks that we live in a society that our mentality goes there. So I'm hoping that narrative can be washed out very soon.
Absolutely. And yesterday, we're recording this on February 2nd, by the way. And yesterday was Women in Sports Day.
Yes.
Women and Girls in Sports Day. So it was a big day. And so when you log on Twitter and you see, millions of people not millions, but millions of people should, but, a few dozen people tagging you, I mean, that's got to feel good, right?
It does, but I'd rather them share my work, and I think it's important. And I tweeted that. I said, I'm so appreciative that you're thinking of me on this day. But retweet one of my articles, show up to a show. If you saw, a woman managing a game, go to the game and pay for your own ticket and buy, like, that's how we need to be supported. Because it's and not, like I said, like, oh, I want to go watch her because she's a girl or she's good for a girl, like, we're just good. But I thought it was very amazing. But I also think that there's other ways to appreciate women, like I said, sharing our work, or pay them the monetary value that they deserve and all of that. So I think just tagging people is only the beginning of how you can be an ally to us.
And one of the people that I've gotten kind of to get to know a little bit in the sports media, who's a real up and comer, and this name's going to bring a smile to your face. Sonia Chen was on the podcast not too long ago.
I mean, so I don't want to be like girly about it, but she's phenomenal. Yes.
She is absolutely phenomenal. And
she was defined as a prodigy, by the way. And I did not disagree.
She's the GOAT. She's doing like bylines for Associated Press. She's getting printed in newspapers everywhere. She's like, so shout out to Sonia, who I know is listening to this, because she speaks very highly of you. I'm telling you that, right? What? She speaks very highly of you. I think it might have been mentioned in her episode, but when you see kind of a young woman like that, like trying to enter into the field, and you see her, and obviously you got to know her too. What is that like relationship and that bond mean? How do you approach that? Do you see someone like, oh, okay, this is a new face, I want to approach myself, she's a young woman trying to make it like I did? What is that kind of relationship like when you see someone young like that trying to break through?
For me, and she was at the Coliseum, for me, it's just like, I want to make sure she knows her way around, just because the Coliseum can be tricky, and I've gotten lost at Oracle Park before, like, but the best part about meeting Sonia was like, she is so confident asking questions, and they're questions that deserve to be asked, and she writes so quickly about it. And I think it was more or less just like making sure she knows I have her back. And it's not just because she's a girl and I'm a girl, but I just genuinely can tell that not only is she damn good at her job, she just has a good soul. And I love those people. And, Janie McCauley, who's a dear friend of mine and phenomenal, when she tells you take care of somebody, you listen to Janie. And she mentioned, take care of Sonia. And I just love seeing her in the press box. And she has a good sense of humor too. Cause me, I tend to like not be totally 100% serious about, I'm barely serious about this stuff. Let's just be honest. Her and I will tweet the same thing, and I'll shout her out around over in the press box, like great minds think alike. And I feel like we don't have a lot of that as far as women goes, because there's always competition, and I've been guilty of it. I've been very territorial, and I've been jealous of women that I feel like were trying to step on my toes, and most of the time they're not. I'm just insecure in that regard. And so she never made me feel uncomfortable or threatened, and helps me when I needed to find out when Buck Showalter had his availability, and she helped me with that. And just, she's amazing. I need to get with her. Her and I need to have drinks soon. But yeah, no, I literally love her. She's fantastic.
And her current job is like, it's a lot, because you're covering a new team each time a new team comes into the Bay Area, and you got to coordinate it with the beat writer that like didn't make the trip or whatnot. So it's very tough. So shout out to Sonia.
And she did it so seamlessly. Yeah. And I hope people understand that too. Like, when you're a beat reporter, you're following that team 24/7. I don't know, not 365, but for 8-9 months at a time. And she becomes a stringer. So she has to, do the Blue Jays sometimes and the Giants sometimes, the Yankees, I think she did for a little bit, which I'm just so proud of her. That's a really big team to cover. And she did it phenomenally. And like, it's so hard to do because as a beat writer, you see things that the normal media doesn't. I'm talking behind the scenes, on the road, things that you would not, as a normal media consumer, understand. And she just did it so beautifully. I remember, I think it was the Mets or maybe the Marlins that she was covering for. And it was like she was there the entire time. Like it felt like she was a beat writer following that team the entire time. And that's so hard to emulate.
Yeah, just wanted to shout her out. And I guess while we're at it too, we mentioned it. Shout out to two people that have been on this show before, Taylor Worth and FP Santangelo Jr. So,
oh my gosh, my boys. Yes.
Yes.
They don't deserve any more attention though. Let's move on.
Okay, moving on. Sorry guys. Kim Ng was someone that you got to interview, and it's your pinned tweet, and that obviously
trying to make me like cry over all these amazing people. No, you're right. I come across some amazing people.
Yeah, and that's your pinned tweet, and it's your pinned tweet for a reason. You said that it's like someone that you really like, you've always wanted to interview, and she's been there for probably a few years now. What was that like, kind of getting to interview her?
I'm going to bring Tony Kemp up because I remember I've interviewed Joey Votto before. I've met Mike Trout. I've met like a lot of big names. And I remember being so nervous. I emailed the Marlins and then I introduced myself to the PR guy and he happened to be standing next to Kim Ng. And I was like, hey, can I interview you? And I was like really nervous to the point where I think I was like uncomfortable. Like I was just saying weird stuff. And the next day I got the interview and I was standing in the A's clubhouse because I needed to grab somebody to talk to. And as Tony's walking in, he hears me say like, oh, I'm super nervous. And he said, what are you nervous about? And I was like, I'm interviewing Kim Ng. And he was like, so same thing like with Brandon Crawford and Alyssa Knack. And he's like, oh, you're going to go interview somebody? Like, that's your job. And I was like, but it's Kim M. Effin Ng. And he's like, so, and my thing was, I've written about Kim Ng for the last 6 years, almost getting the GM job with the Padres, almost getting this in the running. She was almost the next Farhan Zaidi. So it was like these types of things, like the fact that I didn't have to write an almost story about her was amazing. And then I remember like I interviewed her and I was very cool, calm, and collected. It doesn't matter who I meet. Like, I'm a big Joey Votto fan. I remained so professional when I met him. And with her, it was the same thing. But I kind of stumbled when I left. I was just like, I thank you. If I ever need it, thank you. It was just like really weird. But also I made sure I was a professional the entire time. And it was cool to pick her brain because obviously she was a part of the big Jesus Luzardo trade, bringing Starling Marte over the A's. I was genuinely curious about that trade because I remember thinking, let's go, mama. Not only did she get Jesus Luzardo, but she got, money in the deal as well. And I just remember thinking like, how did you come across that? And it's a really tough organization, to run. And I didn't give a chance to ask her about the home run statue, which I should have done. But it was just one of those things that I got to mark off. And then also I got to tell Eric Chavez, he's the reason I'm an A's reporter. And I got to do both of those things. And I made sure to talk to my boss that day and say, thank you for the opportunity to not just Kim Ng, but Eric Chavez, like that. I felt like my dad was there and he passed away when I was 19. So it was just really cool that I had that moment. And Eric Chavez couldn't have been more amazing about it because his mentality is like, I play baseball, but it's not who I am. And he made sure to like talk to me about it. And I actually that was a beautiful, I'm just going to tell you the story. Screw it. So
yeah,
he made the A's Hall of Fame. So we were going to honor him during when the Mets were in town because he was the Mets hitting coach. And we had scrum with him, but I was nervous. I didn't have a chance I want people to know I don't get nervous often, but the 2 times I got nervous this season was Eric Chavez and Kim Ng. And so we finished and everybody's like, are you going to go talk to him? I was like, no, I don't want to bother him. So he's under the tunnel. And I happened to go wanting to be leaving the tunnel to go to the dugout. And I was like, Jessica, grow a couple and fucking go talk to him. And I did. And I was like, hey, it's nice to meet you. Mind you, it's the longest story that I've had in my mind for about 20 years. Right. And I was like, okay, Jess, you have to tell him this story in 25 seconds. So I did. I was like, I was like, hi, I'm Jessica. I'm one of the team reporters. I just wanted to let you know you're one of the reasons I'm here. And he goes, what do you mean by that? And I said, I was like, when I was 12, you hit a home run. I saw we were sharing the same birthday. We were driving home and I told my father, I'm going to be an A's reporter one day. And you were the reason. And he was like, thank you so much for telling me. He's so genuine. He's like, thank you so much for telling me that. Thank you for pulling me aside. I really loved hearing that. And it was like, I'm constantly reminded these people are humans constantly. But in that moment, when I was 11 or 12 and watching him hit a home run, playing third base, us sharing the same birthday, me switching from first to third base that week. And then not to mention in center field was Mark Kotze, who at the time resided in Reno, where I'm from. And now Kotze is my manager. It was like all these beautiful moments that reminded me why I do what I do. And I finally, I got to text my little brother and said, I got to tell Eric Chavez the story. And it was the story that everybody in my family knew. And I told the story for the last 5 years of my career. And I got to tell Eric that. And it was just so bomb. And it was just like one of those things that like, all right, like this is meant to be.
Yep. I've arrived. Yeah. There you go.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And there's no great way to make this segue, but I'm going to make it anyways. I agree with you on the ballpark proposals. I'm like so down on them every night. Like I'm there and like, it's tiresome in my mind.
Yeah.
Just like it's so uncomfortable to everybody there except the people that are in the background, like in that section. They're like, this is great. But to everybody else, it's like uncomfortable. Like it's probably even uncomfortable to the person getting proposed to.
Yeah, you're doing it in front of a bunch of strangers, which is one thing, but you're interrupting the game. Secondly, however, lately, now that I work for the A's, it's like they get paid to put that stuff sometimes on the Jumbotron. I think it's cool. Birthday messages are great, but it's also just, and people are like, oh, are you bitter because like you don't have a ring and nobody's proposed to you? Like, no, that's not why I'm bitter. It's quite the opposite.
That's that's horrible. Somebody would say that to you.
I know, but I love love. I love love so much. I think you shouldn't make a mockery of it in front of a bunch of people at a game.
Yeah, do it somewhere else. Like, I mean, it's almost like it. So it's no longer like maybe the first or second time it's like, wow, at a baseball game, really?
For
but
sure.
now it's like
the first time it was ever done, like that's cute. That's super cute. Yeah. But I think knowing my boyfriend, he's going to troll me and like pretend like fake propose to me, and I will ruin him.
Yeah, there you go. That's I would too. But it's such an unoriginal idea, like at this point. So I had to step in and bring that up. Unfortunately,
it's okay. Thank you for being quick about it, getting out of the way. Same with the FP and Taylor Worth shout outs. They deserve a little attention.
Who?
Thank you. Good call.
A few more things here before we wrap. The Giants signed Sean Manaea this offseason. I know there's a lot of people that listen that are big Giants fans, and
I'm a big Sean Manaea fan. His birthday was yesterday.
Yeah, happy birthday, Sean Manaea. And I was going to ask, what are the Giants getting in Sean Manaea? Because from what I heard, he's a great clubhouse guy. He's a great energy to be around. But what kind of player and person are they getting?
You pretty much mentioned it. The thing I love about Sean was he's an amazing interview. He's very patient. He was on all A's with me, which means I get to annoy them for about 20 minutes. And he was very calm throughout the entire process. He'll have a different hairdo pretty much every week, which is always fun. He did cornrows at one point. He did the fro. He'll color it a different, color. My all-time favorite thing, and I got to watch him. It's a memory I'll never forget. It was the 2019 AL or the AL wild card game, Rays A's. We were hosting. Sean Manaea had a terrible game, and this was back before, when the wild card game was only one game. So you effed up, you were done. And it was obviously the after the game, and the A's had lost. He was sitting in the clubhouse, and they were serving steak and pasta. And where was Chris Davis and Sean Manaea, Sean wouldn't touch his food. He just looked and was spaced out, and he just struggled with that. And with that struggle, like he went to Thailand, he took like a trip for himself and wanted to figure out like, who he was as a person and as a player. And That's a really big stage. Not to mention, we broke the wild card attendance record with like 55,000 plus fans. One of the coolest moments I've ever gotten to cover. And it just was a shifting moment for him. It was a maturing moment for him. And this is a very laid back guy who, he threw a no hitter. You know what he was doing the entire time through that no hitter? Talking to his teammates, not being all like old school about it. He was talking to people in the dugout. People were like, dude, you're throwing a no, shut up. He's like, no, that's like what I am. You're a freaking nature if you're doing that. So he always puts his teammates first. You're always going to get a good mic'd up moment from him. He is so like, he connects with the catchers very well, which is always very important, especially coming from a team like the A's or the Padres, but before that with the A's, where it was a lot of young catchers, and he made them really comfortable. And then, of course, if you're throwing a Sean Murphy, you're golden. When he's on it, he's very much on it. He has like a really unique delivery, some funky stuff. I don't know if he has any new pitches in his repertoire quite yet, but overall you're getting a phenomenal guy. He's happy to be back in the Bay Area. His girlfriend is from Oakland, so she gets to return home as well. I get to see her now again. She's phenomenal. Talat, shout out to Talat, who's like a real one. So it's not only just an amazing sign, and I'm glad it was a 2-year deal as well, because he deserves it. But I think he can bring some more fun into that clubhouse. I'm not saying it's not a fun clubhouse. Mind you, I'm used to an A's clubhouse, and the Giants, they're very calm, serene. It's always dry. There's like candles lit in the clubhouse, and he'll bring some more fun to it. So you guys are getting a really amazing guy.
Well, that's good to hear. And the no-hitter anecdote reminded me of Tim Lincecum was throwing, I believe, like his second no-hitter or first no-hitter, and he sat down in the dugout and went up to somebody and said, so, I'm binging Dexter. And it's like the other guy was like, what? What's wrong with you?
That's what Shamania would do. He would literally just be like, I had this hot dog the other day and it was just really good. Like he would say stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's awesome. Anyways, last thing here. I mean, what do we expect from the 2022 A's? Our 2023 A's.
I can tell you what I expected out of
What do we expect for this upcoming year? And give us some maybe predictions or headlines to look out for.
I will say, I think the signing of Jace Peterson is going to be a bigger deal than people are talking about. Not to mention it's a 2-year deal. And I think about Chris Davis when he signed that 2-year extension. People were like, oh, it's just 2 years. It's kind of like a Hollywood couple scenario where it like when Reese Witherspoon and Ryan Phillippe broke up after 10 years, that's pretty much a lifetime. So the fact that we gave somebody a 2-year deal like makes me just personally happy as somebody just that I could just get comfortable with and used to. Jace Peterson's very much a Tony Kemp mentality, not just in the clubhouse, but a utility guy as well. Plus they had to kind of fill the void of Chad Pinder after he went to free agency. Jesus Aguilar, I mentioned he's changed up his swing a little bit. We really craved a DH / first base guy that we haven't had in a while. Well, Matt Olson, but he, rarely was the DH because his Gold Glove status, we needed him out in the field. So that'll be interesting to see. Seth Brown, he had a really strong power outing toward the end of last season. I called him underappreciated. He's underappreciated from a global perspective on the bigger scope of things, but David Forst, our GM, corrected me saying he's not underrated to us, which was good to hear. Really genuinely pissed off that I can no longer interview Colt Irvin, but it's going to be really cool to see what Fuji brings to the table. We got to cover a lot of the Angels games last year. The Japanese media came out to Shohei Ohtani outings, and it'll be good to have more eyes on Fuji, and to see Fuji go up against Ohtani is going to be great. And Fuji had his opening, talk to us all in English, which I thought was really beautiful. And yeah, a lot of younger guys that we get to look out for. I don't know what the ETA of like the Tyler Soderstroms of the world are going to be, but I have a lot of faith. Nick Allen is definitely a star in the making, playing at shortstop. Ramon Laureano is one of the best baseball players, period. He just doesn't get enough attention. And yeah, I think there's going to be some cool stuff happening. Hopefully we don't lose as many games as we did last season, but that's neither here, we can't do a lot about that. But I'm actually pretty impressed with what we did in the off season. I love the Aguilar signing. Diaz, that's a great signing as well. I mentioned Jace Peterson, Trevor May. Oh my gosh, you know how much fun I'm going to have with him. So it's just stuff like that. And I mean, even having Trevor on that in that pitching squad is going to be great as well. So there's a lot of fun storylines to cover, and if you don't know any of those storylines, I can help you out with that. But don't be so quick to judge that losing or winning record, what have you, because it's like the best group of guys I've ever gotten to work with, and they're phenomenal. And I will say the cool thing about the A's, it's like the seasons of opportunities lately. If Jace Peterson was on the market, maybe he would have signed a minor league deal elsewhere. Aguilar, same thing. Fuji's a Boris client. Like, we're going to get a lot of beautiful Japanese media to cover that. And there was so much media at his welcoming, and we don't really have press conferences anymore. I think it's been since Chris Davis extension, or well, I guess Yoenis Cespedes, he was the last free agent signing that we had a conference for, and just stuff like that. And Bob Melvin, every time he's in town, he still loves himself the A's, and it's a very historical place. So I think it's going to be a really fun season, not just for me, but for a lot of the fans, because we did make some pretty decent signings. I know, was it the Athletic that graded them lately? I think the Giants got like a D, right?
Rightly so. C-, I think.
A's got a C plus, I believe. So it's just, yeah, I was very impressed with the Jace Peterson signing, don't get me wrong. So I think, and that's like the quintessential A's player, utility guy, consistent, come off the bench if he needs to, and all of that. But yeah, it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, and it's gonna be a fun, especially in a fun division too. So that's
and shout out to Johnny Doskow. He's our new radio guy.
Yes,
he's like a member of my family, and yeah, I'm excited about that.
He's good. I was there during his debut, and like when I was leaving, we were in the tunnel, and he was like, "Hey, do you know where the bunker is?" Because KMBR was going to do an interview, so I had to show him like where Adam Copeland was and everything in the bunker. So yeah, congrats to Johnny Doskow, and Jess, I can't thank you enough for coming on. This was a blast, and hopefully this is at the top of your favorite podcast list that you've ever done.
It's the best podcast I've done today. So
there you go. There you go. I appreciate you coming on. You guys could follow Jess on Twitter at KleinschmidtJD. Go check her out. Go check her out also on Awful Announcing. She's also on The Comeback, Awful Announcing as well. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Can't wait to see.
And the A's Radio Network.
And the A's Radio Network, exactly. She'll be a part of the coverage all year long. So it should be a blast to see her. And of course, follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at RizzoCast, and also Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out. Thank you for listening, and have a great day.